Welcome to The Beat. I'm Antonia Hilton in for Ari Melber. In a moment, we'll bring you new video of that dramatic moment when federal agents arrested the mayor of Newark. But we start with a shocking new claim from the Trump administration. Top Trump advisor, Stephen Miller, saying the administration is, quote, looking at suspending a key part of the Constitution, the right to habeas corpus.
President Trump has talked about potentially suspending habeas corpus to take care of the illegal immigration problem. When could we see that happen, do you think?
Well, the Constitution is clear, and that, of course, is the supreme law of the land, that the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus can be suspended in a time of invasion. So I would say that's an option we're actively looking at. Look, a lot of it depends on whether the courts do the right thing or not.
Habeas corpus is one of the most important and basic rights we are entitled to. It is the mechanism that protects people against unlawful imprisonment, and it is enshrined in the Constitution, which says that it can only be suspended in cases of, quote, invasion in the interest of public safety. Trump has tried to argue there's a, quote, invasion as justification for his mass deportation campaign, but a judge in Texas has already debunked that claim, finding the White House has, quote, failed to prove any invasion. Trump, in a cabinet meeting last week, appeared to reference habeas corpus when musing about how he can expand his presidential power despite court orders.
We're facing an unprecedented situation where there's a lot of abuses of nationwide injunctions, sort of seemingly designed to curtail your power, specifically when it comes to deporting these illegal, violent aliens that came in under the previous administration. Have you spoken to your team about ways to mitigate this and continue to deliver for the American people on that?
There are ways to mitigate it, and there's some very strong ways. There's one way that's been used by three very highly respected presidents, but we hope we don't have to go that route.
And these comments come amid attacks on other constitutional rights. Trump trying to ban birthright citizenship and making comments about serving a possible third term, something that the Constitution says is not possible, by the way. So joining me now is Jelani Cobb, Dean of the Graduate School of Journalism for Columbia University and a writer for The New Yorker, and Julian Zelizer, history professor at Princeton and author of The Long View on Substack. Julian, how serious is this moment? Is the threat to our constitutional rights?
It's a very serious threat. The Constitution is the framework for our government, and we have an administration that is testing its strength every given day. And here you hear Stephen Miller saying out loud what we know is coming based on an invasion that people don't see happening. And so this is a test for the country, I think. I think many judges are stepping up and trying to stop it, but they have limited power of enforcement.
Do you take what Miller says seriously?
I think we have to take what he says very seriously. We've seen his influence on policy in the White House and, throughout, two administrations now. I should just say that, when Lincoln suspended habeas corpus, it was in the midst of the Civil War when twice, Robert E. Lee's forces, the Confederates, literally did invade the North in an attempt to encircle Washington, D.C. and bring an end to the war, a favorable end for the Confederacy. And so when we're talking about a conflict in which 700,000 plus Americans lost their lives, we know what an invasion is. That's the definition of an invasion. When we're talking about a conflict over immigration policy, that does not qualify as an invasion.
Well, one of the things that's actually so confusing for people in this moment, I think, is that this administration wants people to believe that they have done unprecedented things on the border. Crossings are down. They have secured the U.S.-Mexico border like never seen before. But also, you need to believe that we are being invaded to such an unprecedented extent that it would mean exercising these kinds of strange wartime powers.
But I think that's true, but it's also consistent with what we've seen, like the tendency to be on both sides of a question. Even when we go back to 2016 and the original kind of reemergence of law and order and saying, the rhetoric was that, people had to be saved by, saved from the marauding gangs of criminals who were roaming the streets of American cities, as opposed to pointing out the fact that crime was considerably down over those years. And so it really doesn't matter. We're not talking about statistical reality or objective reality. We're talking about rhetorical reality, which can be anything that people need at any given moment.
As a history professor, what are you seeing in this moment in terms of rhetorical reality? Are there points in time that you look back to that are very instructive about what we're seeing now?
Not really. I mean, the Lincoln moment is very instructive in terms of the conditions we've seen this happen. Even that was controversial at the time.
At the time,
it
it's true.
remains
Right.
controversial
Right.
with a president who is revered within the canon of American history. So we should see the bar is very high for doing this. But we haven't actually had, I don't think, a president strain the legal system to the extent we're seeing President Trump do that. And so I don't like using unprecedented too much, but I feel like we're in that. And I think Jelani has it exactly right. He uses rhetoric to justify what he wants to do, even when the empirical facts on the ground don't match it. We saw that with the election in 2020.
Right.
And this is the new rigged election. It's the invasion. And even as courts say it's not happening, he says it does, but it's really an excuse to do this. But it's dangerous. The point is, without due process, without the system, everyone becomes vulnerable.
Well, I'll have you both stay with me. We're turning now to breaking news from New Jersey. The mayor of Newark, Ras Baraka, arrested while on a trip to an ICE detention facility. The video of that chaotic moment is dramatic. Take a look. Video showing a tense scuffle with masked federal agents. 3 members of Congress were there as well, including 80-year-old Bonnie Coleman. She's the woman in the center right there. Congressman Rob Menendez called in during the last hour to describe this scene.
Over 20 armed ICE agents, over 20, and there's video. So it's clear to see there's a mayor of the largest city in New Jersey, 3 members of Congress, over 20 armed agents and additional ICE officials there. And then that is when they arrested Mayor Baraka.
Lonnie, I need to get your reaction to this and what signal you think they're sending.
So first, there's a couple things I'll say. I've known Mayor Baraka for more than 35 years. We went to Howard University together, and frankly, he's one of my oldest friends. I will try to refrain from this. It's difficult to see a friend of mine in a position like that. I'll try to refrain and speak about this from as distant a perspective as I can give, and say that this is reminiscent. We just saw a judge being arrested, under these circumstances. And can you imagine, what the outcry would be if we saw a Democratic president arresting the mayor of a largely Republican city over a policy dispute? And for that matter, the city of Newark has maintained that the ICE detention center that's being operated there is being operated illegally. So it's not that this was, there was no basis for the mayor to be there. He was there under the official warrant of his responsibilities as mayor of that city. And so, this is kind of characteristic of the overreach we've seen consistently. We've seen it in multiple arenas. We've seen it with the law firms. We've seen it with what this administration is doing at higher education, including the university I teach at, Columbia University. We've seen it in every arena that we can imagine. And now we're seeing it enacted against elected officials, people who have been put into office by democratic will of the public themselves.
What kind of signal do you think? I mean, you know the mayor well, that they're sending not just to him as an individual, a person who had the right to be there to protest, but also specifically the community of Newark that he serves here?
The point is that meant to say that there are no checks on the authorities, on the administration's authority, and that anyone, if the mayor is not safe, then no one is safe. And I think that it's meant to convey that message. Also, I would commend the mayor and those congressional reps for going there and making the point that the facility was not being operated, according to them, in accord with what the legal requirements are. And I think that's important that we maintain those kinds of standards.
What do you think he's thinking right now? What's he going through?
He's a tremendously, he has a tremendous amount of fortitude, and he's a tremendously principled person, as long as I've known him. And I think that for him, he would, gladly, happily sacrifice his freedom to make sure that a point is made about the fundamental importance of democracy.
So often, Julian, I am asked by voters, people who I'm talking to in the course of my reporting and travels, about, well, when will the media let us know that the line has really been crossed this time, that we're in truly strange territory? How do you advise people on that? How do you talk to people without sounding hyperbolic about what we're seeing, but also addressing the reality of what's in front of us?
It's not hyperbolic. I mean, this is not even about the arrest of an individual. It's about the arrest of a mayor. I think that is the point. This is a exercise in presidential power that goes well beyond what we usually have and what we expect. And I think President Trump is testing his power against all the checks that we have within the government. And a mayor is one of them at local government. And we are also testing institutions, whether it's law firms, universities, or others. But we are deep into the test at this point. And so I think the people who should really answer the question are those who say, why are you being so hyperbolic? The question is, why aren't you being more attentive to what is happening? And that image you just showed, that incident, is dramatic. It was unnecessary. I mean, that's the key. There was no need to do that. And that is a show of force by the president or the administration and the executive branch. And that's where we are.
Julian and Jelani, thank you so much for joining me this evening. And Jelani, please keep us posted if you're able to get in touch with him, how he's doing.
Thank you.
I'll reach out. Coming up, why some kids will be forced to learn from a curriculum that repeats Trump's false claims about the 2020 election. Also, Trump is now in retreat on tariffs, but fears of a recession are growing. But first, breaking news in a case of that student whose ICE detention went viral. A judge now ordering her release. Her lawyer joins me live when we're back in just 90 seconds. Breaking news in a student deportation case that has rocked the nation, and a loss for the Trump administration in court today. A judge ordering the immediate release of Rumaisa Ozturk, the Tufts University graduate, student detained by ICE. Ozturk was taken into custody off the street in Massachusetts there in March by immigration agents in plain clothes. The judge today concluding Ozturk had been unlawfully detained, writing, quote, "There is no evidence here, absent consideration of the op-ed," referring, of course, to an op-ed Ozturk co-authored last year in her student newspaper that was critical of Israel. The judge warning that Trump's targeting of Ozturk could chill the speech of, quote, millions and millions of non-citizens. Supporters gathered outside the Louisiana facility holding Ozturk today, speaking out on her behalf.
She has suffered multiple asthma attacks as a direct result of the unsanitary conditions in which she is forced to remain.
Holding people in custody without due process is inhumane. To think that she's locked up here behind these walls, treated like a criminal, along with the 900 other women, is really abhorrent.
Ozturk is ordered to be released. Her immigration case will continue to play out in the courts. Joining me now is Ramzi Qasim, Rumaisa Ozturk's attorney. Ramzi, what will release mean for Rumaisa and for other students who are still detained?
Thank you so much for having me, Antonia. Today is really a great day. Rumaisa, I received confirmation less than 15 minutes ago that Rumaisa walked out of that ICE facility in Louisiana with one of my colleagues, one of the attorneys on our legal team representing her. This is a staggering rebuke to the Trump administration. The judge very appropriately and very justly and fairly called this for what it was, an attempt to chill protected First Amendment speech. And so Rumaisa can now return to her program of studies at Tufts University, and we hope that she'll be back there very soon.
That is live video right there of Rumaisa on her way out of the facility. Ramzi, you've known her now for weeks. I have to tell you, while watching the bail hearing this morning, I and many other reporters, we were very struck because she is so mild-mannered and kind. In fact, for much of her testimony, she sort of had her hands over her heart while telling the story of the work that she tries to do for children around the globe as part of her studies at Tufts. Can you tell our viewers about who Rumaisa Ozturk is, what she's like, and what she has been going through in the detention facility that she is leaving right now?
It's exactly as you put it, Antonia. Rumaisa Ozturk is a graduate student, a PhD student who has dedicated her life and her work to studying the development of children. Her doctoral work is on the pro-social uses, the positive uses of social media by children and teenagers to help other people rather than promote themselves. That's what she's all about. She's about children. She cares for children, whether they're Palestinian children, whether they're Israeli children, Sudanese children. Her concern and care for children is universal. She came to the United States as a Fulbright scholar. She studied at Teachfield College at Columbia University, obtained her master's, and then went on to her doctoral studies at Tufts. She's not any kind of danger or flight risk or public safety risk, which are usually the categories that are reserved for detention in ICE facilities like the one that you see in that footage. The Trump administration was trying to send a message by targeting someone like Rumaisa. She had been doxxed, and ICE had detained her probably as a result of that doxing. And the message that the Trump administration was trying to send was that they would go after anybody who espouses viewpoints that they disagree with. Now, Rumaisa Ozturk's op-ed, that single op-ed that she co-authored in a Tufts College newspaper standing up for the human rights of Palestinians is something that should be applauded. But even if you disagree with that viewpoint, it certainly should not be cause for detention. And so her release today
and to be clear,
is a message
Ramzi,
back.
at any point has the administration introduced additional evidence, something suggesting that Rumaisa Ozturk was involved in any kind of pro-Hamas activity? Did they ever introduce that kind of evidence?
Never. And the judge today in Vermont, the federal judge, stated as much on the record that the single piece of evidence the government has offered is that co-authored op-ed in a college newspaper. Now, if speech is to remain free in the United States, that simply cannot be a cause for abduction and detention by masked agents.
Can I ask you, on a personal note, what's it like for you to see these images of Rumaisa walking out right now?
It's really hard to describe the feeling, Antonia. Many of us on the legal team were in tears, on the brink of tears when we heard the judge's rulings. There were some delays by ICE. They were insisting against the court's order that she be made to put on an ankle monitor, even though the court had ordered as much from the bench that she should not have to subject herself to anything like that. We had to go back to court to get a written order to allow her to walk out in the footage that you just saw. The sense of joy and relief for her family, for her community. A number of people testified on her behalf. The fact that she can now reintegrate her community at Tufts, resume her studies, and hopefully complete her program of studies as we continue to litigate to prove that this immigration case that has been brought against her is nothing other than an attempt to chill constitutionally protected speech.
What's next for her and for the many students, by the way, that your organization is currently working with? I mean, you're across the entire spectrum here of students who have been arrested and detained by this administration.
Well, we are very happy that Rumeysa is now free. We were happy when another federal judge, set free Mohsen Mahdawi from ICE detention. We were also thrilled that a federal judge reaffirmed recently her order protecting Yun Saw Chung from ICE detention. She has not been detained. And we're looking forward to the release of Mahmoud Khalil. We are pursuing all legal options. We're hoping to have a bail hearing in his case, the way we just did in Rumeysa's case and the way we did in Mohsen's case, so that he too can return home to his family from Louisiana. So that's what's next for our other clients. And for Rumeysa, we'll continue to pursue our case to vindicate not just her constitutional rights, but all of our constitutional rights as people who live in this country and who benefit from the protections of the Constitution.
Ramzi Qasim, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much.
Later in the show, Justice Sotomayor on the battles that America can't afford to lose. But first, signs tonight Trump is in retreat on tariffs. Stay with us. Tonight, Donald Trump in retreat, eyeing major new concessions today as his trade war stokes fears of a recession and undermines his political fortunes. This morning, Trump writing on social media he is open to lowering tariffs on China from 145% to 80%. All this before talks with China even start. It suggests that Trump knows he might have overreached here. The Wall Street Journal calling it a trade war retreat. Quote, if Republicans want to pretend this retreat is genius at work, fine with us, as long as the damage is reduced. Politically, Trump allies are now awkwardly trying to claim victories that don't really exist. Trump's Commerce Secretary mocked for this claim about the draft agreement with the UK, which left 10% tariffs in place.
So we feel really good about the deal. You've heard the prime minister. He feels really good about the deal, right? And we started at 10% and we ended at 10%. And the market for America is better.
And joining me now is Democratic Congressman Robert Garcia of California, member of the House Oversight Committee and Homeland Security Committee. Congressman, your thoughts on Trump's tariff war and its impact on the economy and your constituents?
Yeah, I think Donald Trump is causing nothing but complete chaos. That stunt in the Oval Office is actually doing little to stop the impact of these tariffs. We know that tariffs are a tax on the American people and the American public. I am here across the street right now, the Port of Long Beach and Los Angeles. They are the single largest seaports in the United States. 40% of all American goods are coming into Long Beach and Los Angeles. And I'm telling you that right now, what's coming back is 30 to 35% less because of Donald Trump's tariffs. We're having empty cargo containers coming back. Truck drivers are losing shifts. Dock workers are having to go home. They're happy if they're able to even get a shift out of work a day. This is causing incredible damage, not just to the national economy, but what's going to come for the American consumer in the weeks and months ahead are increased prices and empty shelves of some of Americans' favorite goods. And so this is a real crisis that's beginning to happen here in this country, and Donald Trump should reverse all these tariffs immediately.
Can you take me into the lives of some of your constituents? They're going to see these changes before many other Americans do. What does that mean for their daily lives, their families' ability to put food on the table?
So I've been talking to a lot of workers here in Long Beach and the harbor area. I'm talking to truck drivers, these truck drivers who work hard, working class people. They're putting food on the family's table. They are seeing their shifts reduced. Normally, a truck driver could come in and out of the port, could be 4 times a day. If they're lucky, 5 times a day on a great day. Some of these truck drivers today are getting 2 shifts coming in and out of the port. That is devastating for their revenue. You're seeing their ability to make money slash dramatically. You're seeing now layoffs that are happening in warehouses across the Southern California region. You're seeing in Northern California around the Oakland port, the same types of things happening. And what people don't understand is we're feeling the immediate impacts now, real impacts to truck drivers, dock workers, factory workers. But what this really means is increased costs of goods for the entire country in the months ahead. And what people need to understand is it is the chaos and uncertainty that is causing exporters and imports essentially to shut down. We're essentially making decisions right now based on inaccurate information on tariffs that are changing from one day to the next. And so the supply chain is in complete chaos right now, and everyone should be concerned because this will impact every American.
I need to ask you too, if you've seen the images coming out of Newark of the arrest of Mayor Ras Baraka, and some of your colleagues were there on the ground with him in this incredible scene. We see a congressman right there in the center, sort of stuck in this tug of war with officials on the ground there. What's your reaction to this and what his arrest represents?
This is completely shameful and outrageous. Members of Congress have a right to visit these facilities. It happens all the time. And for this to happen to the mayor and to colleagues, people, all of which I know and respect, is a dark, dark day for our country. Members of Congress have the right to do oversight and to visit these facilities. And the way I see, for example, Congresswoman Watson Coleman there, Congresswoman, all the other congresswomen and congressmen that are there, Congressman Menendez that I see there, this is just horrific to treat people this way, anyone, whether it's a member of Congress or anyone else. And what's also really critical, and it's important, is Kristi Noem, the secretary who oversees Homeland Security, is creating her own immigration laws. She's not following the Constitution. They're deporting people that don't have any right to due process. And they're sending people to these facilities that essentially have gotten no day in court. They have had their due process stripped from them. And so we've got to speak up. It is unconscionable that the mayor would get arrested this way. And so we are going to call this out. Secretary Noem will be in front of our committee in Homeland Security this week, and you can rest assured that she will be asked the tough questions about how this happened to the members of Congress and the mayor.
Well, speaking of Secretary Noem, she was just in front of lawmakers, and she basically said again from this administration that they have no plan to follow through with what the Supreme Court has ordered, which is that the administration needs to facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. I mean, and then add that to the fact that, the president was talking to my colleague, Kristen Welker, saying, I don't know, when asked about due process. What are they telling us? I mean, what's coming next here?
I think the American public needs to understand that the president of the United States is defying a 9-0 unanimous Supreme Court decision to facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He is defying the Supreme Court. He is tearing down our institutions. This is, I've said, I believe so. This is a constitutional crisis when you have the president essentially dismissing what the Supreme Court and lower courts have affirmed. And we know that Donald Trump's own administration has said that he was sent there by mistake. And so it is crazy to think that a president is choosing to defy a Supreme Court, which we know is already quite conservative. So we've got to be loud. We've got to demand that Donald Trump not just return Kilmar, but actually support and understand that due process is in the Constitution. And due process is in the Constitution, not just for United States citizens. Due process is there for all persons in this country. It's something that we're all afforded and that we've got to stand up and fight for.
Well, I know a whole lot of voters are hoping the Democratic Party is really going to translate that fight on the ground for them. Congressman Robert Garcia, thank you for joining us. Up next, a new lawsuit over a controversial plan for how to teach kids about the 2020 election. Tonight, there's a new legal challenge over plans to put President Trump's claims about the 2020 election into schools. It's happening in Oklahoma. The top school official there, Ryan Walters, driving a new social studies curriculum that echoes Trump's false claims about the election.
Walters admitted he altered the social studies standards. Examining issues related to the election of 2020 is changed to identify discrepancies, including sudden batch dumps.
Are the newly approved social studies standards legit, or should they be tossed? That's what the newly filed lawsuit by Oklahoma parents and teachers want to know. Among the objections we've heard to those standards, their inclusion of questions surrounding the 2020 election.
Walters is no stranger to controversy. He made headlines for suggesting that the Tulsa race massacre could be taught in schools without making much ado about race. Here's how he explained that.
I would say you be judgmental of the issue, of the action, of the content, of the character of the individual, absolutely. But let's not tie it to the skin color and say that the skin color determined it.
Walters also once called the teachers union a, quote, terrorist organization.
I don't negotiate with the teachers union. They're a terrorist organization that is content. Members. That has continued to spread misinformation around the state and lie about our administration.
And last year, Walters sent a video of himself praying to all Oklahoma public schools, requiring that it be shown to all students and their parents.
We are excited to announce a new office in the Oklahoma State Department of Education. That will be the Office of Religious Liberty and Patriotism. For too long in this country, we've seen the radical left attack individuals' religious liberty in our schools. I will now say a prayer. I pray in particular for President Donald Trump and his team as they continue to bring about change to the country.
As far as the new social studies curriculum, it will go into effect next year unless it's stopped by litigation, of course. Joining me now is Ryan Walters, Oklahoma State Superintendent of Public Instruction. Superintendent, let's start with that curriculum. Why would you want Oklahoma students exposed to thoroughly debunked election conspiracy theories in the classroom?
Well, look, I've seen all those headlines too, and you know, here's the reality. Look, President Trump should have won the 2020 election. You know, you look at things like the ballot dumps, you look at the mail-in ballots, you look at the voter fraud, you look at the manipulation by the media and foreign countries, and look, what we've got in the standards are facts. We want critical thinking students, we want critical thinking Americans. We want them to look at the data, look at the statistics, and come to their own conclusion. We're not going to allow the left to force a narrative onto our kids, and so that's what
this isn't a narrative from the left, Mr. Walters. These are claims that failed time and time again in courts of law. People who I'm sure you know had the opportunity to bring quality evidence in front of judges, and they failed. So why would you want students to spend time on that?
Well, look, your own station reported some of the fraud. Your own station reported the batch dumps late at night. Look, it's about the facts, and they can come to their own conclusion. The students can look at these facts and say what happened in the election of 2020. But what we're not going to do is allow left-wing activists and the teachers unions to come in and drive the narrative. Kids need to look at the facts. And listen, if I was the head of the most left-wing radical organization in the country that had the teachers union, I'd hate these standards too. But the reality is we're going to teach Americanism, facts, and we're going to let kids come to their own conclusion on the election of 2020.
This doesn't really have a whole lot to do with teachers' unions. They're not even a party to this lawsuit. There are educators and families who are a party to this lawsuit against these new academic standards. You're being sued, by the way, by a lawyer who is a former attorney general, a Republican. And they're alleging basically that you tried to pull the wool over the eyes of fellow education leaders. I want to read this to make sure I get it right. Half of the Oklahoma State Board of Education claimed they were unaware they approved the standards in February, that when they approved those standards, that the final version had significant differences from the version they had seen from your office in December. Were you trying to mislead them about what was in these standards?
Absolutely not. I mean, listen, some Republicans have been bought off with 30 pieces of silver from the teachers union. That's happening. But what we're going to
continue... Again, the teachers union isn't involved in this lawsuit, so it has to be someone else.
Come on now. The teachers union, the ACLU, they've been behind all these lawsuits against us. But listen, we stand by the facts. We're going to put facts forward and let kids decide. Listen, I know the left-wing media often spins a narrative and just forces it on folks, and facts bother them. Facts bother teachers unions. But what we're saying is, listen, kids, study this. Look at this. We want you to understand the elections. We want you to understand American history. And yes, the left is fighting mad because they've controlled our classrooms. The only reason we're sitting here talking about this today is because we're taking education back attack from the radical left. They're fighting mad about it, but we're going to get education back to an understanding of facts and history and let kids critically think. I think we should all be able to say we want critical thinkers. We want to be about facts, data, graphs, and charts. That's how we're going to study the election. That's how everyone across the country should be studying this election.
It's interesting that you keep bringing up the left. You talk a lot about woke teachers and indoctrination, but you quite literally tweeted this on X, or X this on X, on April 29th, calling these standards the most unapologetically conservative pro-America social studies standards in the nation. Is that not you kind of giving the game away there? Saying that instead of the left-wing indoctrination, I'm trying to indoctrinate kids into my conservative worldview.
No, look, conservatives want to teach history. They want our kids to understand America. They want kids to love the Constitution, understand the Constitution. That's what we put together. Again, we're unapologetic. Look, I want patriotic students. I want kids who love this country and understand it.
What does that have to do with conservative? You specifically said conservative. Why are you even mentioning a political tilt or ideology when you are in charge of public school instruction?
Because conservatives love their country. They love our history. They love the Constitution. We put more primary sources in this document so kids can understand the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, understand American exceptionalism. And again, I'm sorry, it's a conservative principle. We're unapologetic about that. We want kids to love our country. We want kids to understand the rights that have been protected over time that come from God and the Declaration of Independence. So yeah, look, our standards are unapologetically pro-American. They unapologetically cover the 2020 election with facts, and we're incredibly proud of it. They're the best in the country. Every state should have history standards the way that ours look.
Oklahoma has faced a teacher shortage like much of the United States. After COVID, Oklahoma students are in many cases struggling with reading and math, the fundamentals. Why, again, would you want them to focus on debunked conspiracy theories around an election? How is that worth your teachers, your educators, your family's time?
Oh my goodness, because it's important. We've launched the largest literacy campaign in state history, the largest tutoring campaign. We pay teachers based on merit here in Oklahoma. So we have teachers making over $100,000 a year. We pay teachers $50,000 to move into the state. We have turned around the teacher shortage here in Oklahoma. We're turning around test scores. And yes, I'm sorry, a very important part of our education system is teaching students to understand their country, their government, how government works, because we want America to continue to be the greatest country in the history of the world. And parents are very concerned that the education their kids are getting is not getting them to be informed citizens to make decisions at the ballot box, make decisions on the future of the country. So I believe as a former history teacher and a parent, look, we've got to teach our kids about American exceptionalism, about their rights, about campaigns, about elections. It's crucial for the future of this country.
Well, I've spent a lot of time in Oklahoma lately, and I know the teachers, I know the challenges that they're dealing with there. They tell me they don't see left-wing indoctrination. They really are craving the opportunity to spend time on the basics with their students and not be involved in the partisan stuff right now. But thank you so much, Superintendent Walters. We appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you for having me on.
Up next, backlash to new power grabs by Trump on his retribution tour. The Trump DOJ has launched a criminal investigation into New York Attorney General Letitia James for alleged real estate fraud. It's the first known criminal probe of a law enforcement official who's gone up against Trump in the past. Last year, James won a civil fraud judgment against Trump for $486 million and has joined other Democratic officials in suing the Trump administration.
It's unfortunate that President Trump publicly attacked me a few days ago. And as a result of that, he telegraphed to the Department of Justice and to FBI that I should be targeted. You see, this is nothing more than an extension of his revenge, his retribution. And he finally got up to the J's.
Joining me now is Molly Jong-Fast, MSNBC contributor and author of upcoming memoir, How to Lose Your Mother. Molly, much of the campaign was spent on the Trump side, signaling, telegraphing retribution was coming.
Yeah.
Is that what we're seeing here?
I mean, it's so interesting because Trump continually undermines what he does. You know, he'll undermine it before, he'll undermine it after. At all points, he undermines what he's doing. So exactly. And I think what's interesting, there's a real credibility gap. And that's why you see this administration losing so continuously in court.
in the courts. And I'm curious when we start to see things sort of spill over more into the public sphere. I've been very interested in what's going to happen here as this administration proposes austerity right now for everyone. No more than $2 for you this Christmas. While they also talk about building a new ballroom, they make forays into crypto. Then we know that there are major healthcare cuts coming in this bill. So when that reality collides with tariff reality, when does it break through to some of the voters who seem to have not really woken up yet?
Well, what's amazing is his polls are already almost down to sort of his first term when he was really polling badly. But it's interesting. I interviewed Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear on my podcast, and he said, you know, it's not $35 versus $2. It's $2 versus no dollars. And that's what we're looking at. We're looking at kids not having presents under the tree at Christmas. And we already know Mattel said it's going to raise prices. We already know we see the Port of Long Beach, you know, these ports with less and less traffic. So we know what is coming down the pike, right? Even if Trump is able to get a trade deal going with China immediately, we're still going to have a bottleneck with the supply chain, just like we had during COVID. So that, and you know, I think there's a real scenario where we have stagflation, where prices go up, inflation goes up because of the tariffs, and we are in a recession because of the tariffs. And that is a bottleneck that's very hard to get out of, and that, you know, Japan has really struggled with. And I think it's quite, you know, there's just a lot of unforced errors in this administration that are ultimately, I think, the good news is it's undermining the administration. It's keeping them from doing some of their most authoritarian impulses. But the bad news is that it has a lot of unintended consequences.
So you talked to Beshear. Do you overall think the Democrats are doing enough to meet this moment? I mean, to talk about what Letitia James is now facing. You know, we just heard Secretary Noem saying, basically, no, we are still not bringing Kilmar Abrego Garcia back. Don't wait, don't hold your breath. You know, in just a few days, there's going to be a hearing on birthright citizenship, something that all of the experts say that this administration's attempt to do away with is just simply unconstitutional. Really not a lot of disagreement about that.
So there have been some good moments this week. Chris Murphy, you know, interviewing Noem during those hearings, and he said, you know, you're blowing through the budget. What are you doing? Patty Murray talking to the head of the FBI, Kash Patel, going, you know, where's the budget? We are here. So Congress, Democrats in Congress have been not as much as I think people would like, because the polls show that people want their representatives fighting, you know, in a peaceful way for them. But I do think that we've seen more of it, more accountability. People want Congress to keep this administration in check. That's what all the polls say.
Do you think they will organize themselves around a storyline, whether it's oligarchy, crypto, whatever it may be?
Yeah, I mean, I do. And I think, but they just have to do everything, right? They have to do more. This is if we are in an existential threat to democracy, which I think most people would say we are, then they really need to do everything they possibly can.
Thank you, Molly. Program note, you can catch me and my co-hosts, Ayman Mohyeldin, Elise Jordan, and Catherine Rampell, Saturday and Sunday on the weekend primetime, right here on MSNBC from 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern. That does it for me.